Today's guest is going to be Giants legend, Hall of Famer, Ring of Honor member, and the forever captain of the New York Football Giants, Harry Carson. And he joins us right now on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Harry, you got John Schmeelk and Lance Medow here at various locations on remote. Thank you so much for being with us. Hope you and your family are safe and healthy, my friend.
Yeah, we are. Everything's going pretty well right now, so I just hope it stays that way.
Yes, so do we, Harry. No question about it. Unfortunately, we did get some sad news a couple of days ago. Your former coach, Marty Schottenheimer, he was the position coach for the Giants at linebacker when you got to the NFL. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about Marty Schottenheimer, the coach and the man that you got to know so well here with the New York Giants?
Well, Marty wasn't just my coach, but he was a friend, and very brave man. He was probably the best teacher when it comes to the fundamentals of football that I've ever seen. Keep in mind, when I say this, it kind of blows people away, but I'd never played middle linebacker until I was drafted by the Giants in 1976. And Marty was the guy who drafted me. I was his choice out of all the other players around the country. I was his choice. And he chose me on a whim that I could play the middle linebacker standing up position as opposed to a down nose tackle defensive end position that I played in college. And so everything that Marty tried to get me to do when he was giving me, running me through the fundamentals of just playing the game, I sort of did it my way, and it wasn't his way, but he allowed me to do it because I felt comfortable. But the other thing is, he recognized that I was able to do or come to the same results, me doing it my way as opposed to doing it his way. Sometimes he got better results out of me, allowing me to just do it my way. So he was a coach who knew exactly what to do in regards to players' talents and so forth. I remember going out to Hawaii for the Pro Bowl one year, and I ran into Derek Thomas, who was he's a Hall of Fame linebacker from the Kansas City Chiefs. And we were just sort of sitting and talking about Marty and how he was such a great teacher. And so when we lost him, I just recognized that he was such a great teacher. I mean, there are some coaches who are not very good teachers. They can coach, but he knew the fundamentals that he wanted you to have. And so when I became that player, starting midway through my rookie year, I sort of validated Marty choosing me with, I think it was like the 104th pick in the 1976 draft for the Giants.
Harry, you mentioned that he made that decision on a whim when the Giants took you in the fourth round about moving you from the defensive line to linebacker. What do you think he saw in you? Because as you can attest to, there's risk-reward. Whenever you make a decision like that to move a player to a position that, to your point, you've never played before, what specifically from the conversations you had with him that he saw in your skill set that thought that you would make a very good interior linebacker?
I can't really say exactly what he saw. He never really went into that, but he felt like I was smart enough to make the transition. And there's a Dr. Frank Laudata who used to be involved with the Giants. I spent a lot of time with Dr. Laudata for him to see whether, I could make that transition, because everybody can't do that. They can't, if you start playing a position when you're a kid, generally you're going to play that position until you stop playing. Well, for me, I never played middle linebacker. I played, lineman in high school, college. I had a really great college career. But then to come to New York, the media capital of the world, to learn a new position. And that position really is the quarterback of the defense. And to have him choose me to play that position, he had to be completely right about his hunch. And what they needed wasn't like a Lawrence Taylor type. They wanted an inside run defender, somebody who could step up and plug the holes and so forth with force, take on the center, take on guards and tackles and so forth, and be able to stop the running back. And I guess he saw that in me, and he taught me how to, everything about the position. And I started midway through my rookie year against the Minnesota Vikings, and the rest is history. I'd like to say that had it not been for Marty Schottenheimer, there would never have been a Harry Carson. There would never have been a Harry Carson as a New York Giant. There would never have been a Harry Carson Hall of Famer, because Marty really was the key. If I had not been able to make that transition, it would have been on Marty. But because I did make the transition and play well, as I may have alluded to earlier, I wound up making the all-rookie team. And then a couple of years later, after Marty was gone, I was able to become, NFC linebacker of the year. And I went from a 4-3 defense that I was able to master to when Parcells came in, and we went from a 4-3 to a 3-4. And so Marty was really the catalyst for me playing the position. And we spent a lot of quality time together. One of the things that he shared with me, and this is why I loved Marty so much, he was brutally honest with me. And he said, there are going to be people who are going to doubt your ability to play this position because he said, there are people who feel like if you don't come from a big-time program like Southern Cal or Alabama or Notre Dame, then you're not going to be able to play that position. I went to Little South Carolina State. I'd never played the position of middle linebacker, but I was able to make that transition and play it. But Marty believed in me, and I don't know if any other coach would have believed in me that much as he did. And so I really love the man, not just the coach, but the man. And you find that anybody who has played for Marty really love and respect him as a man, because he didn't just look at you as a ball player. He looked at you and he treated you like a man. And that's what players want. They want to be treated as men, and they want to be treated with dignity and respect, not to be talked down to in any way. But we were all in it for the same thing, and that is to win the game, become the best players that we could be, and so forth. And Marty, again, I attribute so much of my success to Marty Schottenheimer.
You're listening to Big Blue Kickoff Live, which is part of the Giants Podcast Network, presented by Investors Bank. We're joined by Giants legend, Pro Football Hall of Famer Harry Carson. And Harry, before we get to the present-day Giants, great stuff on Marty Schottenheimer, by the way, just awesome stories. The one thing you mentioned in that second answer struck me a little bit, and I'm thinking about how they look at the modern-day linebacker position, and I feel like they're more likely to convert a safety to a linebacker than a defensive lineman these days. What are your thoughts in terms of how the NFL views the linebacker position now compared to when you were playing, and just how the position and maybe even some of the responsibilities have either changed or not changed over the years?
Well, I think the game has changed from the standpoint that it's not quite as physically demanding as it used to be. When you're playing a 4-3 defense and you're playing against offensive linemen who are coming off the ball and they're coming off to block you with all the force that they have, your job is to plug the hole wherever you think the ball is going.
Sure.
And so now you have a lot of off-tackle plays. You have a lot of reaching and grabbing. We used to go up against the sled all the time in terms of how to effectively, ward off a block because they were coming, offensive linemen were coming at you, not just to grab and hold you like I see a lot now on the field, during games, but they're coming out with their bodies against yours. And so you have to attack the offensive lineman. And one of the things that we had to do is, use your forearm to hit the guy in the face and lift and hit him with all the power that you have and grab and sling them wherever the ball is going, sling them in the opposite direction and make the tackle. So, when I played back during that era, and I hate to say this because it seems like I'm so old now, but when players played during that era, it was more of a physical game.
No, you're right.
Than what it is now. And so, it was about survival of the fittest, and you didn't necessarily run around blocks. You engaged the guy in front of you, and you took him on, and it was power against power. And then you had perhaps a John Riggins, who was a power running back, who's behind him that you have to get that guy who's like 280, 290 pounds off of you, and then you had to hit the running back who had the ball, and he was running with a full head of steam. So, it's a different game now. I'm not that close to coaches now to understand whether, they look at players now and try to get them to go from being a safety to a linebacker. If they're talking about doing it in a linebacker position, it probably will be as a rush linebacker, not necessarily a inside run defender linebacker.
Sure.
Well, Harry, I think the one thing you could perhaps argue that hasn't changed from the time in which you played versus how they view today's middle linebacker is the intellect, which is always a key component. And I want to bring it to today's Giants because you look at the impact that Blake Martinez made on this past season's team and what he did for Patrick Graham's defense as being that guy that could get everybody set. When you made the move to middle linebacker, how much, Harry, did you take on that persona, that you were an extension of the defensive coordinator, an extension of the defensive coaching staff, and you were critical in getting everybody set, similar to what Blake Martinez has brought to this current Giants defense?
Well, the good thing is most of what we did back then, it was, we were trained well in practice. We had little stunts that we threw in there, but I was the middle linebacker and I became the signal caller. And that's the other thing that I really need to touch on in regards to Marty, because I went from being that down defensive lineman, just knowing what I had to do and the tackle next to me and maybe the linebacker next to me, to knowing what everybody had to do. And so it's one of those things where you practice certain things during the course of the week, and we might want to show a certain look prior to the slap, to the snap of the ball. And, it's about just calling out the movement that we needed to make at that time, just prior to just anticipating when the ball is going to be snapped, making sure that you get your tackle ends or whatever to shift when they need to shift, so that in disguising what you're doing, it catches the offense off guard. So, there are things now that might be a little different than back in the 70s and 80s, but I would venture to say there are probably things that we did back in the 20s and not the 20s, I'm getting too old now. The 70s and 80s that guys don't necessarily do now. But talking about Blake Martinez, I've watched him during the course of this season, and there are a lot of players who have played the position of like inside or middle linebacker in the last few years. Blake Martinez is the real deal as far as I'm concerned, because he does not miss tackles. He has that force that, he can stick it up in there and movement and so forth. He's a very active middle linebacker. I applaud him because from what I see, and I know he's not like a young guy in this league. I mean, I know he's played with Green Bay, and
yep.
I watched him when he was at Green Bay, and I thought he was a solid find for the Giants. But I thought he did a really, really good job as that signal caller and playing that position. And I look forward to seeing him more, in the future.
What were your overall thoughts on the defense this year, Harry? I thought it was by far their best performance since probably back in 2016 when, Snacks was here with OV and Janoris Jenkins and all that. I think you had to be pretty impressed by the job Patrick Graham did, kind of putting everything together, disguising, trying to confuse opposing offenses. Did you have fun watching what this Giants defense did out there this year?
I really didn't think that the Giant defense or, the team in general was going to be very good, because you have a new coach.
You weren't alone, Harry. Don't feel bad about it. You weren't alone in that. Trust me.
Yeah, and, you got everything is new, and you have, free agents. I mean, there are guys out there I've never heard their name or anything before, and you see them, and early in the season, they're sort of floundering around. But as the season went on, you could see them mesh and get better. And the defensive line was doing very well, and they came up with really good rush, pressuring the quarterback and so forth. I grew to really respect, what they were doing and what this new defensive coordinator was infusing into these guys and the way that they were playing. They did not give up. They may not necessarily have played the best games, during periods of the season, but they got better and better and better. And by the end of the football season, this is a team that is ready to take the next step and become more of a dominant team, not just rushing. If we can keep everybody in place, because there are going to be people who want better contracts and all of that stuff, and and far be it from me or anybody else to say that they don't deserve more money, but I hope that the pivotal pieces will be in place for next year's season, and I hope everybody can stay healthy and work out during the off season and get ready for the next year.
Harry, on a related note, I think when I look at this current roster, it's still a relatively young roster. A lot of these players have been drafted over the last few years, and I want to bring it back to your experience when you joined the Giants, because you joined the Giants during a period of time that the franchise was in transition as they made the move from the 70s to the 80s. And I look at this roster, and Saquon Barkley was named the captain within the second year of his career. Daniel Jones was named the captain very early in his career, and you were named the captain very early in your career. But that was a veteran team, you can argue. I guess what I'm getting at, Harry, is when you're a team that's in that transitional period, which you can argue the current team is, how important is it that these young players, like yourself, when you joined the team in the late 70s, takes on that leadership role to help make the team move ahead and make that jump?
Well, those guys really are the future. And the reason why they are captains is not necessarily all that they do on the field, but the way that they conduct themselves off the field, the way that they conduct themselves in meetings, the way that they conduct themselves in the weight room, the way that they are not just about them, but they're looking to empower and just work with their teammates to get better. That's the reason why those guys are captains. When you have a guy who, well, I'm not going to go down that road. I was going to say something, but let me just keep my opinions to myself. There are guys. There are guys who are, might be great players, but the way that they conduct themselves, being selfish or whatever, other players see it and they lose respect from the other players. And so these guys are the ones who are going to be there through hell or high water. They're about making the team better. And so whether it was when I played way back in the day, ancient times with the helmet that you fold up and put in the back of your pocket or whatever. No, it's when you're selected as a captain by your teammates, it really is an honor. And again, it's about carrying yourself in such a way that you understand that it's about the team. It's not about you or anybody else. It's about the team and the team succeeding.
Final question for me, Harry. What's the next step now in terms of this team? Where do you want to see them improve next year? And just your overall thoughts on Daniel Jones moving forward into season 3. Obviously, his progression is a big key to where this team is going.
Well, I'd love to see Daniel Jones secure the ball and play a more effective game. He's had some highs, but he's also had some lows. And I'd like to see him be more of a solid, quarterback. I'd like for Saquon to come back and continue to play well. I would like for the offensive line to be able to play a more solid game and protect Daniel Jones. Again, I'd love for the defense to become more and more aggressive and tenacious, to develop an attitude whereby teams and offensive units around the league grow to respect, the Giants' defense and so forth. I'd like to see that, but it's you might not necessarily get everything you want this year, but I think that with the success that they had this past season, they know now what they're capable of doing. And it's up to them. And, all of those guys should be in the locker room and in the training room and in the weightlifting room now, preparing for next season. And just knowing and understanding what their role is. They're guys who, they can do it if they want to do it. The only factor that creeps in there is the injury factor, and you can't do anything about that. But when they step on the field next season, everybody should be raring to go and anxious to win and just be the best team that they can be.
We're talking with Hall of Fame linebacker Harry Carson, Giants legend. And that brings me to last question I have for you, Harry, about continuity on an NFL team. Because as you mentioned, you can never predict the injury bug. You hope everybody stays healthy for 16 games. Impossible to determine that. But I think another important aspect as this Giants team looks to take the next step is continuity on the coaching staff. And you could speak from experience, Harry, because when you joined the Giants, I mean, you need two hands to determine how many defensive coordinators you had to deal with throughout the course of your career. It looks as if Joe Judge's staff, for the most part, is going to return, whether it be Jason Garrett, the offensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator. How important is that? I tend to emphasize that you played the game. I'm curious your perspective. When you have a staff that stays together, how important is that even in today's NFL?
Well, I mean, you can have a staff that I had coaches who kind of came and they went. But you have to not necessarily have continuity. It's up to each player to just understand what their role is and be the best that they can be. Because not only are coaches moving, players are moving.
Sure.
And so, players, they can play this year with the Giants, and they wind up going someplace next year, and they have to show what they can do under a new coach, a new defensive system, or offensive system, or whatever. So there's always constant change, but you got to be able to adjust to the change, and that change isn't necessarily, just about from week to week or whatever. That change can be from play to play. Patrick Graham is from that Bill Belichick tree, and when I see him on the sideline talking to his players, it kind of reminds me of Bill Belichick as defense coordinator, making changes during the course of the game of stuff that we had not even practiced during the course of the week because, the opposing team showed us something that we had never really seen. So change is always going to be there. You just have to know how to interpret everything and be able to implement change, whether it's with a coach or a play or whatever. You have to be able to improvise on the fly and just be the best player that you can be and help your team win.
I lied, Harry. One more quick follow-up because you were there with Ray Perkins.
Don't lie to me. Don't lie to me.
You were there with Ray Perkins and then Bill Parcells. They had that strong voice at the top of the totem pole in terms of everything we're talking about so far in this interview. Do you think the Giants have that guy in Joe Judge?
You know what? I can't answer that question because everything that I know about Joe Judge is what I've seen on television. And I haven't really spent a whole lot of time around him. I know that the players respect him, but I can't make any personal judgment myself on Joe Judge. The coaches who I played for, I know those guys from head to toe. Ray Perkins was that guy who would walk into a meeting room and he would just stand there while everybody was talking, and he wouldn't say a word until everybody quieted down. And then after maybe 2 or 3 seconds of silence, he would start to talk. Parcells, he would come in and he'd have something to say. All of the coaches are different. Sometimes it works for that particular coach. Sometimes it doesn't. Joe Judge, I think that he probably he's bringing a little part of Bill Belichick with him, in this position as head coach. Because, I've heard a couple of things that he has said, and I think to myself, damn, sounds just like Belichick, but I can't, like I said, I can't determine or I can't really say because I haven't really spent a whole lot of time around him, but I know exactly what he's looking to do, and I applaud him, and I think he's going to get the job done.
Well, Harry, hopefully once this damn pandemic is over, all of us can get back in the building and we can all interact with Joe Judge and the coaching staff a little bit more than we've been able to over this past year.